time now for me to invite the third panel discussant, who will be talking about inclusive education in open distance and e-learning, the respected Professor YEMISI Obashoro-JOHN.
Mr. Chairman, sir, thank you very much for this opportunity to share my perspective on open distance learning and especially inclusive education. A young man lost his father, a young soldier lost his father in the army, and he was in the army, and then his commandant was informed, but they didn't know how to tell the young man that his father died the day before. So the RSM was called, and the RSM said, "Don't worry, I'll tell him. I know how to tell him." So it was parade time, and everybody was on the parade that morning. And the RSM got there and said, "How many of you get father here?" The young man put up his hand with us and he said, "Put down your hand, your father is dead, fall up." He went straight to the point. So we're going straight to the point. Point is inclusive education. The SDG tells us that we want to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education. So it means that there's exclusion. So if we have inclusion, it means we have exclusion. And what is the exclusion? Exclusion is leaving someone out. Simple. It drags us and draws attention to those people that are doing the excluding and the person that is being excluded. It talks about the existence of injustice, and it talks about denial of social rights like education and housing. So inclusivity, in short, means bringing everybody in, putting everybody in the education thing, the education matter, putting everybody in there, irrespective of their disability, irrespective of their sexuality, class, ethnicity, and gender. So it talks about diverse worldviews. It talks about diverse backgrounds. Talks about diverse needs, and it talks about diverse technology to support anybody who is in the education matter. Inclusive education is education for all. So everybody is included, irrespective, as we said, of whatever disability you may have. So when we look at inclusive education, two terms come to mind: integration and inclusion. If we say integration, we are bringing people with disability and we are concentrating on those people with disability. We're looking at curriculum that is teacher-centered. But when we look at inclusion, we are looking at the learning environment. We are looking at curriculum. We are looking at assessment systems. We are focusing on the learner. The curriculum is very important here. And so, when we talk about the curriculum, we look at the approaches to run through it. We look at the methods, and we look at the different kinds of assignments that will come with it. So inclusion in open distance learning, open and distance learning, open and flexible learning, whichever way, inclusion is the learning environment. We are looking at that learning environment. We're looking at everyone, no matter the origins of their difficulty, whatever it is. We're bringing everybody into the system, into the broad room, into the big room that is not physical. We're bringing everybody into that kind of environment. We're looking at the benefits. There are various benefits that will come when we include everybody. But basically, what is most important is the assertiveness that comes with the ability to solve problems for the learner. The learner decides who he wants to help him, whether he's his peer or his facilitator. So whichever way, the learner here is the most important person and is to solve a problem. And that problem is determined by him. And that problem is determined by his needs. So when we look at the kinds of learners that we come to the ODL environment that we're talking about, we're looking at learners that are disabled or differently abled. We're looking at those with emotional disability, speech and language disability, all kinds of health impairments. We're looking at those with social disability, physical disability, and of course, economic disability. And then we have all abled persons, different kinds of ableness who will also come. Remember, we're looking at different kinds of disableness. We're also looking at different kinds of ableness who will come into the learning environment. Now, these learners can be put in these groups. The traditional ones, they are the difficult to reach environments. They are the urban ones who live in urban slums. There is the working class who would also come to this environment. There's also the privileged, the technocrats who would also want to come into this same learning environment that we're talking about. So when we look at the learner that comes to ODL that we want to include, we look at the individual differences that come with every kind of learner that comes. Height, weight, senses, whether he's friendly, whether he's conversational, we look at that. We look at the linguistic angle, whether he's monolingual or multilingual. We look at the emotions. This person, has he suffered some kind of deprivation? Or is he going through some kind of deprivation? Has he been rejected once, or is he well accepted? We're looking at formal learning, previous education, digital skills. We're looking at the economy of the family and his own personal resources and financial resources that he can bring to the table. We're looking at the family structure, the size. The type of family will determine the kind of learning that he will be seeking and the kind of environment that will suit him. We want to look at even the position in family. Is it the first child or is it the only child and the others? And of course, does he have prior exposure to these things we're looking at? It has been clearly stated here that technology is just the means, is not the end there, but what exposure does he have to this? So let's look at the kinds of distance learning, open distance learning clientele that we have, and e-learning clientele all over the world. We have this group. If you look at them, these are people who will come to ODL. Academics, teacher training, teachers who are in training, university students, adult women, adult learners, community members, the senior in a school, association members. These are all clients for ODL and e-learning. Job seekers. And of course, all this group with various forms of disability. Remember, we also have the able-bodied and the differently abled. Now, these are people. What would be the conditions for them to be able to learn when they come to, if we put in everybody? One thing is immersion. Everybody must be soaked in the content that we want to give out. Demonstration, we must give room. We must give room for them to be able to practice, understand the content. So the learners need demonstrations. Expectations, everyone has expectations, but they want people who have high expectations of them. So if low expectations of your learner, they are not likely to learn easily. responsibility. He wants to take decisions for himself. He wants to employ what he has learned. So there must be room for practice. And of course, approximations. And then there must be the room for feedback. Where do we go? How have I done? What have I done well? How do you want me to do it better? We want to have room. Importantly, we need learner engagement. Now, this learner engagement must include some of these and many more, but we need the expression of knowledge. Whatever the person has learned, he must be able to express it. And he must be able to discuss what he has learned. If he cannot discuss what he has learned and he cannot express it, probably the practice time is not sufficient. And probably the nature of the engagement has not been properly stated. There must be collaboration. Collaboration between the learner and the facilitator. The facilitator and other facilitators. The subject teacher with other subject teachers. There must be collaboration. There must be negotiation. What kind of negotiation? What time is convenient for you? How best can you turn in? How early or how fast can you turn in your assignments? These are negotiations, and there must be partnership. So we must see the partnership that the learner wants and the kind of partnership the institution must give. These kinds of partnership must be totally and properly worked out. And of course, we must have administrative support. This requires a lot of planning. I'm sure so much has gone into this event. And so much should also go into the class where we have an inclusive setup. The scheduling of materials must have administrative support. Then we'll be able to say that we are moving away from the telling, the paradigm shift. So instead of telling the students, now you are coming to a place of guiding the students in learning. So with materials, what kind of materials are we looking at? A wide variety of materials that the learner can pick from. So it's not just one text. There must be a wide variety. And then there must be a lot of out-of-class activities. He must be able to see these and have time to be able to run through as many as you can give. In those days when we were in the college, we had a course called extensive reading. By the way, I didn't see it at Zaria. So we had this course in in English language class. We had this course, extensive reading. We were asked to read as much as possible, but at the end of the week, you turned in a summary of every book you read. So we read all the Chinua Achebes in the world. We read all the Peseta series. You remember all those? We remember the Ngugi wa Thiongos. So we read, so this is the kind of thing we're saying. Give them a lot of materials and let them just go on and do a lot of reading. So the materials must be there and it must be in wide variety. The facilitator also must set the scene and make sure that the learner is properly involved in what he's doing. The learner also must contribute, and he must initiate some activities himself, and he must also challenge the facilitator. Of course, not going to fight him, but to ask questions so that he can learn and take notes. The teaching learning process must be flexible. Class organization, class arrangement, when to come, when not to come, all those kinds of things must be given so that thinking will be creative and there will be analytical issues or analytical times in the class to go through everything in the content, in the material that had been provided. Then the outcome, improved learning, that is what we get. We'll get more hands-on experience, and of course, every creativity will be properly rewarded. Now, so for us to have inclusive classrooms, what will be the building blocks? What should we look for and what should we add so that our classrooms in ODL can really be inclusive? At the heart of the vision of inclusion is respect for rights and differences. People are different and they all have their rights. We must also accommodate all those that are hard to reach. Remember, we talked about the traditional rural, and then we have the traditional urban. We have all those kinds of people, there are some that are difficult to reach. So to include everybody, we must make sure that we accommodate them and try to reach them. There must be a belief that there is the belief, and we must build on that belief that every learner is a successful learner. Every learner, if you give him the opportunity, he will be successful. And of course, efficient ways of using scarce resources is one of the things that inclusion does. And it brings everybody in so that we can spread it and everybody will be better for it. We must have materials, modes of delivery, methods of delivery should change. It is not, it has been said this morning so many times, it's not just the Zoom. It's not just the time we claim to spend on the net. It's much more than that. So our modes of delivery, our methods of delivery must change. And of course, we are not suggesting that we change what the learner and the time the learner is learning. Remember, it's a flexible thing. The learner has everything, but we must support him in his learning. What do we need also? We need building blocks that will talk about creating awareness for inclusive education in ODL, increased sensitivity, and constant communication. We're looking at a situation where everybody will be accommodated. Everybody, people living with disability, people living with ability. Even the people living with ability, we know that all of us are disabled in some form. So every one of us, so we need to bring everybody in and understand that we must understand the issue of flexibility. We must support the individual and help peers to support themselves in their various needs and in the diversity of their needs. We must also, as a building block, provide required funds, required resources, required teaching materials. We must expand current initiatives. This initiative is good. The ones we have in UNILAG, they are very good. All over the world, the initiatives are there. They are working. But we need to expand and make sure that we give room to more people to be able to come in. And of course, we must improve teacher education, teacher training. We must improve that so that we will have clear understanding of knowledge for, knowledge of, and knowledge in inclusive education. We have talked about collaborations and partnerships. We cannot miss all this out. Again, as a building block, we need the acquisition of digital skills. Of course, not just the acquisition, there must also be the mastery. So we must master, and collaboration among researchers, university faculty, administrators, families, communities, professionals, and instructional support providers is very important if we need to go on with inclusivity when it comes to ODL and successful education in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor YEMISI. Starting with SDG 4, equitable and quality education for all, paradigm shift, making education learner-centered, integration and inclusion, and ensuring that everybody has access and opportunities. And she listed out the various disabilities, including economic disability, social disability, emotional disability, and differently abled persons. And it's important that we remember that the moment you join, how much exposure have you had to social media, internet, how much exposure, and at what levels are people joining to get this done? Please, let's hear a warm UNILAG greeting for Professor YEMISI.
Thank you.
You know, it's interesting that you should be saying that you did your NCE in ABU Zaria. My professors at the Bayero University Kano are complaining because I'm taking a higher degree there. So When I said I was ambassador to Unilag,
Unilag.
I started getting under-table complaints.
Stories.
But I'm also ambassador to Bayero University Kano as well, because that's where I'm taking a higher degree. I'd like to congratulate you, and I've received a lot of messages that say that paradigm shift is critical, and that there must be a recording of all of this. Somebody says, nice presentation, Professor. We must improve teacher education, which is very key, and a great performance, ma. We are proud of Professor Obashoro. Well done.